AIFA Blockchain Registers Part 2. Let's find out together what type of blockchain to possibly use and why. But first, subscribe to the Blockchain for Healthcare channel to stay updated on what the world of blockchain offers in the field of health and healthcare. Hello from Fabio Fiorentini and from Morghi, the mascot in Pictore. Welcome to the new video on blockchain for healthcare. In a previous video, I explained what AIFA registers are, what they are used for, and what advantages blockchain technology could potentially bring if applied to them. Today, instead, I'm making a more technical video, and I will explain which type of blockchain is more appropriate to use in a potential application for AIFA registers, that is, public blockchain or private blockchain. In my opinion, however, we shouldn't limit ourselves to a mere list of pros and cons of private blockchain versus public blockchain. It is more stimulating, more intriguing to understand how and why a certain choice is made based on the risks, the objectives, and the actual state of the National Health Service. And then in April, the so-called game changer arrived. That is, in April, the EDPB, European Data Protection Board, released the guidelines 02/2025 on processing of personal data through blockchain technologies. That is, the 02/2025 guidelines on the processing of personal data through blockchain technologies, note, technologies plural, which outline the key requirements for GDPR compliance. So what do they do basically? They tell you where you have to play and by what rules. You may or may not like them, but those are the rules. If you genuinely want to be operating in Europe and you truly want to utilize blockchain technology, especially when using patients' sensitive personal data, you absolutely must adhere to these important guidelines. If you do not fully comply, then you can forget about blockchain entirely. So they tell you, why do you want to use blockchain? Are you sure you want to use it? Do you really want to use it? Fine. If you are absolutely sure about decentralizing, then do it according to these rules. If you don't comply, forget about blockchain. So, with a public blockchain, we would certainly have guaranteed immutability and data integrity. Then there's traceability and auditability. In a regulatory context, for example, a public blockchain could serve as a source of shared truth and simplify any potential audits. Then we would have decentralization and network security. In fact, in a healthcare context, no single entity would be able to compromise the registry, and trust would shift from the central authority, that is AIFA, to the decentralized infrastructure. Now, I see that as being a bit complicated to actually happen. Working with a public blockchain still means working with an open standard, and this provides a set of tools that could also encourage the development of more interoperable healthcare solutions. Interoperability is certainly better supported by a public blockchain than a private one, and then there's the matter of potential community involvement. Let's say that innovation, this degree of innovation applied to a field, to the healthcare field, on a public blockchain, could also involve as partners the developers who work on that public blockchain. It's not automatic, mind you, absolutely not, but it could happen. And then, it's not a trivial point, let's remember, but a public blockchain is certainly more long-lasting and independent of an external provider. This is not a negligible aspect because it protects against potential problems, the classic problems that can always arise between a user and a provider. Although I am a supporter of public blockchains, I must admit that in this situation there are some really significant critical issues. For example, the famous immutability of the blockchain clashes with the right to be forgotten enshrined in the GDPR, which provides for the deletion of data upon request or their anonymization. Then, there would be the problem of transaction costs and the dependence on tokens. Let's take, for example, a public blockchain like Ethereum. Okay, every time you go to write on it, what happens? Whether you're writing or activating a smart contract, there are costs, fees to be paid, the so-called gas fee, and they are paid in cryptocurrency. What happens? What happens is that if we were to transform the AIFA registry, or rather apply Ethereum's blockchain technology to the AIFA registry, every time a change needs to be made to the registry, and maybe a smart contract is also activated, these have to be paid for, then if there's a lot of traffic on the Ethereum network, the fees increase and there might also be a delay because precisely there's a lot of traffic and we need to write to the AIFA registry in real time immediately, and this traffic delays the writing in addition to increasing the costs. But most importantly, there would be so many of these interactions, each with a fee to pay, that the cost would be exorbitant. Even though, specifically for Ethereum, with the London update in 2021 and Dencon in 2024, the cost of gas fees has been reduced, becoming more predictable and stable. That doesn't change the fact that managing it would still be very expensive. Furthermore, the whole system would be exposed to cryptocurrency volatility, and it would force AIFA, and here the situation becomes a bit, let's say, outlandish, to have and manage a cryptocurrency portfolio with all the administrative problems that would entail. Then it must be said that AIFA would no longer be the owner, or at least it would no longer have complete governance, complete control over the structure, and that alone is enough to make it clear that a completely public blockchain cannot be used. Also, even though the gap is narrowing now, public blockchains generally have lower performance and scalability compared to a private blockchain. And finally, you have to remember that all the processes would need to be converted into smart contracts. So that would be a huge technological job, a really significant one, most likely very expensive too, and you need people who are capable of doing it. For example, think of the risk you would run if there were bugs in the smart contracts. A smart contract that manages a MEA, the reimbursement, and if there were a bug, a third external entity could get in and divert that reimbursement elsewhere for its own benefit. Real disasters could truly happen. Then there are other points that are quite crucial. Let me give an example. If we have a hash on the blockchain that represents a patient's record, which might be held in an external database, and AIFA could even trace it back to this patient's identity, well, that hash is still fully subject to the GDPR, including the right to be forgotten. And another thing, who is the data controller on a public blockchain? Because for the GDPR, it's crucial to know who the data controller is. But on a public blockchain, where, by the way, AIFA no longer has complete governance, and finally, is it really necessary to use a decentralization that is so, forgive the term, extreme, that it surpasses the trust in AIFA? After all, AIFA is a regulatory body that enjoys trust at an institutional level. Do we really need to completely cut out trust in AIFA? In these cases, blockchain is mainly used for data integrity and also for traceability, mainly with respect to third parties, so that all the steps are monitored. And this applies, for example, when there are MEAs, reimbursements to be made, especially in the case of pharmaceutical companies. So perhaps this total decentralization isn't so necessary. What is certain is that if we were to use a public blockchain, the data must always be strictly kept off-chain. This also really helps with GDPR compliance. And then regarding scalability, going back to what we were saying a moment ago, the use of layer 2s, also aided by the Dencon update for Ethereum, which promotes a reduction in gas fees precisely when using layer 2s, can help a great deal. The fact is, a private permissioned blockchain remains much more scalable in terms of speed, and it resolves all those critical GDPR issues that I highlighted just a moment ago. So what is the best solution? One solution that has been used, I believe, recently in Italy as well, is to use a private permissioned blockchain which resolves all the regulatory issues. So, the right to be forgotten, GDPR compliance, which is crucial, the issue of privacy. The actors would be those involved in using the AIFA registries, and all governance would still remain with AIFA. Scalability would be absolutely guaranteed. Then, periodically, this private blockchain would be anchored to a public blockchain, such as Ethereum, for example. In this particular way, the significant problem of data integrity is effectively solved, and the crucial act of anchoring to a robust public blockchain, such as the widely recognized Ethereum network, would essentially serve as a comprehensive and transparent form of external audit. I don't know if you like that idea or not, let me know in the comments. If you liked what I've shared and you've made it this far, please leave a like. Thank you. And if you're interested in following the evolution of blockchain technology as it's applied to the world of health and healthcare, subscribe to the Blockchain for Healthcare channel. Until next time, goodbye.